The life of Sir Patrick Moore consistently proved people wrong. During a sickly childhood in which he suffered from a heart condition and other serious ailments, doctors warned that he shouldn't expect a long life. But until his death at the age of 89, he continued to present the monthly astronomy series The Sky at Night, thus contradicting another conventional wisdom, the belief that TV is a medium for beautiful young people. Although modern media focus groups would probably advise against putting on screen presenters in ill-fitting blazers and monocles and regimental ties, The Sky at Night, first screened in 1957, achieved the record of the world's longest-running TV show with the same presenter.
One thing I can promise you. If I'm still alive in 25 years' time, in 2007, and if I'm still broadcasting, I'll still find plenty to say.
Moore only ever missed one edition when in hospital with food poisoning. And even as the effects of age became increasingly apparent in appearance and speech, maintained his passion for educating viewers about the mysteries of the universe.
All the indications are that the Russians are now making such immense progress that almost anything may happen at any moment.
He introduced successive generations to satellites, moonshots and eclipses.
You know, if I'd come on the air in 1957 when we did the first of these Sky at Night programs and said that within 5 years I'd be showing you pictures of the first man to go round the Earth in orbit in a spaceship, well, I think you'd have regarded me as mad.
However, the first astronomer to become a TV star also had another screen career, sending up his eccentric personality in light entertainment and quiz programs.
And if I may trouble you, Mr. Moore...
Mainly, though, he remained starstruck in another way. He always maintained that his greatest achievement was inspiring the astronomers of the future.
This is a powerful light. And this one is simply a small pocket torch. But until you knew that one was further away than the other, there was no way in which you could tell.
This previously unseen interview was recorded in 2007 at his home in Sussex, where he'd lived for much of his life, and where, in deference to his age and health, The Sky at Night was filmed during his final years. "78 years since you were given a book called The Story of the Solar System. Do you still look at the sky with excitement?"
I most certainly do, because the trouble is that I'm no longer very mobile physically, and therefore I can't do what I did. But until this happened, yes, I was in my observatory on every clear night. I very much miss it now.
So you're not able now to look at the sky in the way you would like?
Not really, because my observatory, which is outside in the grounds, it's got a very nice 15-inch telescope in it, but the trouble is I'm not mobile now, and I can't get into the dome. So other people use it, but sadly I can't. It's an old wartime injury that caught up. These things happen.
You're regarded by a lot of people as an eccentric. The monocle is not a very usual form of eyewear. The xylophone is not a particularly conventional instrument. Do you accept that you're an eccentric?
Apart from having two heads, I'm not. No, the monocle, I can see quite well without it, but if I put my monocle in, my two eyes are equal. Otherwise, they're not. I just put in there to sharpen things up. The xylophone, well, when I was a boy, about 9 or 10, somebody came to see us with a little xylophone. I don't mean a toy, a little band thing. And I tried it. This is rather fun, so I went on. But I say I've never had a music lesson in my life.
But you're an unusual, vivid figure in the way you talk, in the way you perform. Is any of that cultivated?
No, not a bit. Not in the slightest. I've never consciously cultivated anything at all. It's just me.
When you watch yourself on television, one always sees one's own faults very clearly. I mean, mine, I know, I talk far too fast. I have to get things in. I realise this perfectly well. But it's no good my trying to slow down. I mean, this is just me.
Did you always speak fast as a boy?
I don't know, really. It's a long time ago. I don't think I did particularly. I hope I don't speak too fast now.
No, you certainly, you slow it down for broadcasting, but if I'd met you in childhood, you would have been recognisably the Patrick Moore we know.
I don't know, because between the age of 6 and 15, I was very much of a cock, and I couldn't get around at all, really. I missed my official schooling for that reason. It's a nuisance. But I mean, I was the same kind of person, but I wasn't very active then. I couldn't play any games, for example.
But this is the extraordinary thing that I'm talking to you. You're at the age of 84.
84.
You were not expected to have a long life at all, were you, because of your childhood illness?
Well, I got a slightly cropped heart. These things happen. I've coped with that one all right. There's certain things I can't do, certain things I can, but I've managed anyway.
But in childhood, you were effectively treated as an invalid for 10 years.
Well, more or less, wasn't quite 10 years, 6 to 14 and a half. By the time I was 15, I could get around again. And of course, not long after that, I got into the RAF. So I managed it then.
You were an only child. Many people have theories about only children that it encourages their imagination. Is that the case?
I know why I'm an only child. My father and mother would have liked another, but they knew quite well they couldn't look after and educate more than one, so they didn't have another. I would have liked a brother or sister, but that didn't happen.
Did you feel lonely in childhood?
I do think I felt lonely. I had plenty to do. I knew plenty of people because I couldn't get around to do things other boys did. And therefore, since I'd never done it, I didn't miss it.
Given that astronomy has been such a part of your life, that moment, if they ever make the life story of Patrick Moore, the movie, the moment when you're given that book at the age of 6, the story of the solar system will be deeply significant. Did it feel significant to you at the time?
I wasn't actually given it. I was in the dining room in my old home, and it was raining, and I was a bit bored, and I reached out and looked in the bookcase. And my mother was always a bit interested in astronomy. Not wildly so, but enough to have one or two little books about it. And I picked up one of those in the bookshelf behind me now, The Story of the Solar System. It wasn't a boy's book, it was an adult book, but my reading was all right, and I hoped that I wouldn't be hooked out of that chair till I finished the book. This is fun.
And it was a 19th century book, so presumably the view of the solar system was, by what we know now, fairly primitive.
Not really. Obviously we know far more now than we did then, but the essentials were there. They haven't altered a lot. So it was a very good book in 1898. I read it, as I say, when I was 6, over 30 years later. But it was still good, it still is.
And you had a lucky chance, there have been many in your life, which was to meet a significant local astronomer.
I had two great slices of luck. One, I was fascinated by astronomy. I lived in Worsted Lane, East Grinstead. Opposite us was a big estate owned by a man named Hanbury, of Allen and Hanbury's. He grew orchids, I may say. And in his garden he had a small private observatory, Brockhurst Observatory, run by an astronomer named W.S. Franks. He was a well-known astronomer, about 5'8", had a long white beard, looked exactly like a gnome. He was a delightful chap and a brilliant astronomer. And I got to know him, and he very kindly took me over there and showed me bits and pieces how to observe. And I did that. And then, when I was 14, Frank sadly was killed in a motor smash. And Henry said to me, look, you know your stuff. I want someone to run my observatory, show people off when they want to, bits of research here and there. Will you do it? So I'd be honoured. So I found myself director of an observatory at the age of 14. And that went on until just before the war, when Henry died and the observatory was sold. That was one slice of luck. Other slice of luck was the British Astronomical Association. A friend of our family, Major A.E. Levine, was a member. He'd been talking to me and said, well, you're very young for it, but I'll put you up for membership. And we were going to Sion College then, shaking hands with the president, the Astronomer Royal, and being welcomed as a member. I was 11. Exactly 50 years later to the day, I was president.
You were the president of it. It seems extraordinary for a boy of that age to be becoming a member, to be running the observatory.
It was sheer luck. It was only a small private observatory. My duty there was to keep various records, because I could use the telescope whenever I want to, it was a 6-inch, and demonstrate whenever it was done. So I did that. And nothing to it.
But did it feel an unusual thing to be doing to you?
Yes, it did, frankly. I mean, it was unusual, but I could cope with it. I mean, it wasn't very onerous, and didn't have any specialised knowledge, but I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Your autobiography is unusual in that your first 30 years are dealt with in 2.5 pages at the beginning of the book, as if you regard your childhood as unimportant.
Well, it wasn't to me. It would be unimportant to anybody else, and nothing really to write about.
But psychologists, psychiatrists, novelists think that childhood is the crucial period. It's where we become what we will be.
Have you ever met a psychiatrist who wasn't a raving nutcase? Because I haven't.
So you regard your childhood as effectively insignificant?
It wouldn't interest anybody else, so I didn't write about it. In my long life, I have met so many interesting people, and I thought that might be worth putting on record, which is really why I wrote the book.
Your father, you mentioned very little in your memoir. You say at one point he and I were quite different people.
I was the wrong son for him. He was he went through the First World War and got an MC, and he was very much of the army type. A brilliant athlete, a county hockey player, first-class amateur boxer, and he and I were just different. He was like the strong, macho, athletic son, which I wasn't. It wasn't my fault. We got on all right, but we were different.
Your mother, you have a performing side, clearly, and that may have come from her, because she had been a singer.
Yeah, before the First World War, she was trained as a soprano by Sabatini and Carisi in Italy. And before she finished her training, she was off to lead an Italian grand opera. The First World War came along, married my father, was then an army officer, and never did it. But she was good enough. And I must say, when I was a boy, I'm told I had a very nice voice. When my voice broke, it didn't break, it shattered. It's perfect enough for playing the Demon King in local pantomime, but it's useless for anything else.
And you say in the book your words are exceptionally close to your mother.
I was, yes. And we stayed together. There's no secret about this. I'm not a bit sensitive about it. My girl was killed in the war. Nobody else for me. Therefore, I didn't marry, and I knew from the age of 19 I wasn't going to marry. Well, my mother and I were very close indeed, so why split up? So we didn't. Simple as that.
You lived in the same house until
Always.
her death?
She died in 1981, aged 94, and she was mentally fine right up to the end, and physically fine until she was 92. We were very close indeed.
But that decision you made at 19, that you would be alone for the rest of your life, that would surprise a lot of people. Many people, even if they were bereaved in those circumstances, they met other people. You never have.
It went too deep, I'm afraid.
A lot of people would have felt lonely living their life on their own. You've called yourself a reluctant bachelor.
I would have liked a wife and family, of course I would, but that wasn't on. But certainly I've had plenty of friends all through my life since the end of the war. So I've never been lonely from that point of view. Of course, I say I would have liked a family, but I loved it. But it was never struck me I wouldn't have one. But these things happen, and blame the late Herr Hitler.
And I don't want to do too much on this or to probe too deep into this, but Lorna, she made such an impact on you, even at that age.
We were absolutely everything to each other, and that was that. These things happen.
You say you were in some ways the wrong son for your father, but he was a military figure,
Yes,
and you yourself, you were determined to fight in the war.
I didn't want to stay at home. I do certain things that I couldn't do. If I'd gone into the army or the navy, I'd have lasted 10 minutes, but I haven't got the right kind of heart for it. And I wouldn't have lasted. So the one thing I thought I might be able to do was to fly, so I did. So my father served in the First World War with great distinction. I served in the Second for the total lack of distinction, but at least I served.
I'm surprised, given your health history, because a number of people were invalided out, but you were able to pass the medical.
I wasn't entirely honest with you. I was rather economical with the truth, but these things happen. But after all, at the age of 77, I was still playing cricket and doing rather well.
And you say in the book, again, it's tantalising, you say, I had a rather interesting war, but we'll leave it at that.
Yes, we'll leave it at that.
You would never go beyond that.
It's a long time ago. Old men forget.
But you haven't forgotten, though, have you?
Old men forget.
You just don't want to tell people, but you haven't forgotten.
I forget now. I really do. My memory is very bad in some ways.
Have you written it down anywhere? Would it ever be published one day?
Well, I began my book, really, at the end of the war, because that's when things started happening to me. And I got involved in all kinds of things, the astronomical side and the writing side. Again, I had an immense slice of luck. A few years after the war, Ayrton and Spottiswoode, the London publishers, were looking for somebody to write a book about the moon. And I'd given a lecture in London called A Guide to the Moon. They heard about this and contacted their American side, Lawson's, and I was invited to write a book about the moon. I'd never written a book before, so well, I have a go. And I was lucky, it caught on. I was invited to write another one, that caught on, and there we were. So that finished my university career, unfortunately, because before the war I had my Cambridge place ready, which I didn't take up, and after the war my Cambridge place was still there. But it would have meant taking a government grant, which I wasn't prepared to do, so I'd do a bit of writing and pay my way through, and then writing took over and I never had time, so I missed it in the end.
When you say you were not prepared to take a government grant, why not?
I prefer to do things on my own. I prefer to stand on my own feet. I did even then.
And does that come from your childhood, do you think, from your parents?
Just me, I think. But see, I was lucky because these books caught on, and I've never been stuck since from that point of view. I have a tremendous job now revising my biggest book. It's taken me the best part of a year.
And the writing of your books is unusual in that the typewriter on which you produce them, it will be 100 years old next year.
1908 Woodstock. And on that machine, with my two middle fingers, I could type accurately 90 words a minute. Now, of course, I can't because my hands aren't right, and therefore I'm slow, and I make mistakes when I never did before. And everything takes me 10 times as long, which is an infernal nuisance, but there it is.
And you wrote a chapter for NASA, who I think probably expect these things to be sent to their mobile phones.
NASA were preparing a book about the moon sometime of the year, and they asked me to write a chapter about the lunar transient phenomena. And I wrote this and I sent it in. I've got their letter. It said, "Dear Patrick, thank you for your chapter. This is exactly right. The right style, the right length, the right research. We're delighted with it. Can go straight to press. Thank you very much. And congratulations, you're the first author to send in his chapter. In pencil at the bottom, what the bloody hell did you type it on?"
But there is an even older typewriter, which I think also, at the age of 6, you were given a much older typewriter.
My grandfather's 1892 Remington, abandoned by him as too old-fashioned for his office, and that was found in our loft and given to me to play with. I taught myself to type. I still got it. It's a lovely old machine. But you can't do any speed on it because it hits the roller underneath. But it's good.
One of the recurrent things in your life, I think, in your early life, is that you're self-taught as a typist, which a lot of people do, but also as an astronomer, you are self-taught.
That's perfectly true. So I did it from books and meetings. I had some tremendous piece of luck. I was able to join the British Astronomical Association. I gained so much from that.
And the first thing that attracted you in astronomy was the mapping of the moon.
Well, I think in astronomy, amateur or professional, you're bound to specialise in something. And in my case, it happened to be the moon. Therefore, that's been my main role in astronomy. And my only real research was in joining in the lunar mapping. I was one of the moon map team. Of course, all the work I did on that is now completely obsolete, because now you go to satellites and spacecraft, but they didn't exist in those days. We had to do it then, but now, of course, it belongs to the past.
Is it a regret to you at all that you didn't study astronomy formally?
No, for two reasons. First of all, I am so interested I could do what I wanted to, and the moon and planets were my particular joy. Secondly, I know my limitations. If you're going to be a professional astronomer, you've got to be a good mathematician, and I am not. I have not got a natural mathematical mind, and therefore I would never be a theorist. So just well that I didn't. I may say, when I meant to take my degree, I was going to take my degree in geology. First of all, because lunar and planetary geology interests me most, and secondly, in those days, not now, but in those days, the maths you needed for geology weren't so advanced as those you needed for astronomy. I could just about to cope with that, but I never got started.
Your broadcasting career, which has been extraordinarily successful, you're the longest-running presenter of a single show now, but it got off to what would have been a frightening start to most people because your first broadcast was in French.
Yes, I was doing a broadcast about Greenwich Observatory with the then Astronomer Royal, Sir Harold Spencer-Jones. It was on the BBC Foreign Service. And it was a live broadcast, and they turned the cameras on and said, "Bob, it's in French, do you mind?" By the grace of God, I didn't, but had it been anything else, I would have done.
So you were able to discuss that subject in French?
French is all right. I've got an appalling accent, because during the war I flew with the Belgians. I've got a lovely Anglo-Flemish accent, and my grammar is not impeccable, but I'm all right. I've translated books from French.
The Sky at Night, which has been a very large part of your life and your fame, that happened because of you'd made a previous programme which had interested the BBC?
Paul Johnstone, the BBC producer, who was actually an archaeologist, looking around for someone to do a regular programme on astronomy in a way that hadn't been done quite before. And he'd heard me do one broadcast. Could I be the man? So he rang me up. Would I go and see him? So I did, and we talked, and we got on. And it was agreed, therefore, we'd do a test programme. We didn't do a test in the end. We went straight on the air. And the BBC said then they'd create this programme, put it on the air once every 4 weeks for three months to see how it went. And that was 50 years ago. Again, a huge slice of luck for me. I mean, the fact this lasted for so long is not due to me at all. It's purely the subject. And also, when we'd been on the air only 4 months, the space age started. Up went Sputnik 1, and astronomy suddenly became headline news.
Did you think at the beginning as to who might be watching, what the audience might be?
Yes, I thought everybody. Well, we'll try and give the latest news on astronomy and keep people up to date without going too deeply into it. And again, we were lucky, because at that stage there was a bright comet, an Andromeda, that had come down, and that was the main subject of our first programme. And people went and looked at it. And it just caught on.
And you suggest that it was a very good time to be starting, because we'll talk about the space race in a moment. But even before that, it was also a time when people suddenly got excited about flying saucers, the idea that there was something out there.
Oh, we always get better. The flying saucer craze still goes on even today. Alien abductions are great fun.
I record myself as being the most complete sceptic about the idea that flying saucers are spaceships coming from other worlds. I don't believe a word of it, and I'm quite sure that all the sightings can be explained much more easily than that.
I did a programme called One Pair of Eyes once, in which I had flying saucers, flat earthers, hollow globers, even a man who believed the sun to be cold.
You don't think the sun's hot?
No, the sun isn't hot. It's not a hot body. It causes heat, but it's not hot itself.
The sun itself is cold.
Well, cold or temperate, like the Earth.
What puzzles me a bit is that at the moment I'm sitting here, say, in this lovely old vicarage, and I can see the sun, and I can feel what I think is heat on my forehead. It's coming from the sun.
Well, now, suppose you had an electric generating station. It doesn't have to be on fire,
Yes.
but you can have an electric radiator and the generating station, which is completely cold, may be causing heat on your neck. So it doesn't mean that the generating station itself has got to be on fire.
But I think you have a form letter that you send out to correspondents saying you won't answer letters on UFOs, the theory that man didn't land on the moon, and all the rest of it. You're quite resistant to the conspiracy theorists.
Oh, it's sheer rubbish, obviously. But no, I sent out that letter when I was absolutely inundated with mail at one stage. But normally I reply to everybody, and I do have so many letters from youngsters, and I always reply to those. I say, if I had done anything at all in this world, it gives me great pleasure to go around and find well-known amateur astronomers and well-known professionals who began either by watching the sky at night or reading one of my books. And if I've done anything worth doing, it's that. I've done my best. Others could have done it better.
But Dr. Shapley, there must be many worlds like the Earth in the universe. Surely some of them may be inhabited.
Well, by inhabited, I suppose you mean inhabited by living forms, things that we would call life. And the answer to that is, I think the probability is exceedingly high that there's abundant life scattered throughout the universe.
Very early on, one of the questions there is you're asking people, is there any possibility of life elsewhere in the universe? That has been a constant question.
Look at it this way. Our sun is an ordinary star, one of 100,000 million stars in our galaxy. We know of 1,000 million galaxies, that's only part of them. And many of these stars have planets, we know that. Therefore, the total number of worlds like the Earth must be absolutely staggering. And I refuse to believe that ours is the only form of intelligent life, but I can't prove it. And I think the one thing we don't know, if you have a world where life could appear, will it? Well, I think we may answer that soon. After all, there was theory about life on Mars. Well, there are no Martians, no canals. On the other hand, there may well be a certain amount of low-type life on Mars, and before long we should find out. And if there's any trace of life on Mars, that will show that life will appear where it can. And that will be a very strong pointer. So I'm sure there are plenty of intelligent races up there, but they are light years away, and they certainly can't get to us by any means we know.
And that's a crucial point, because the counter-argument often put is that if there were life, there would have been some kind of contact by now.
The distances are so vast. You can't send a rocket to the nearest stars. It would take far too long, and things like suspended animation don't really work. And when you start talking about time warps, space warps, teleportation, thought travel, that is sheer science fiction. But television would have been science fiction only a few centuries ago, and we may be as near to the exotic forms as we were the television.
If we are ever going to contact those other civilizations which must exist, it's got to be done, I think, by some method about which we know absolutely nothing at the present moment. And I suspect we're just about as far away from that kind of thing as King Canute was from television.
Going back to that very first programme, 26th of April, 1957,
yes.
Virtually all television was live in those days.
Yes.
You were a relatively inexperienced presenter, so 10:30 at night, the light goes on. Were you terrified?
I wasn't terrified. I mean, I've got about as many nerves as the average rhinoceros when it comes to that kind of thing. But I do remember seeing on the screen a regular monthly programme presented by Patrick Moore. And I remember thinking then, my entire career depends on what I do during that 20 minutes. And of course it did.
Television was quite scary in those days because huge numbers of things could go wrong. That would happen.
Oh yes, that did. I once swallowed a large fly on television. That was great fun. And the case of the Russian who came in to take part and who didn't speak any English. All kinds of things happened. We had the famous 50th Sky at Night. And there we began to show Jupiter and Saturn through a telescope. And we had a big telescope down at Brighton where George Hurl was. And 5 minutes before the programme, and 5 minutes after it ended, the sky was clear. In the programme, total cloud. We had to store for a quarter of an hour.
What we planned to do was to start off by showing you some stars, then go on to the moon, then Jupiter, and finally, the most spectacular thing of all, Saturn, the planet with the rings, which never has been shown before on direct television. George, what do you think of the prospects now at the moment?
I think we're nearly totally obscured, Patrick. I saw Jupiter a few moments ago. I can see it now.
I can see it's
but
gone again.
It's gone
This
again.
is one of these infuriating things about which we can do absolutely nothing, I'm afraid.
Nothing at all.
George, can you see anything at all?
Vega!
Can you see
I
Vega?
don't know whether I can get on it.
Right, the star Vega, which is the thing we wanted to show you. It's a bright blue star right above us, as I said earlier on, and with any luck now, we will be able to get the telescope on it. I can see it quite clearly, and I think we're just about going to have time to show it to you. But, of course, there's still a lot of drifting cloud up there, and we just can't tell whether it's going to be obscured at the critical moment. Of course, you won't see Vega looking large, because no telescope yet built will show a star.
It's gone,
Point right.
Patrick.
Is it gone? Oh, no.
Just as I got it on the crosswires, it blacked right out.
How absolutely typical. There's nothing we can do about it.
I can't move a 24-inch telescope quicker than that.
No, I'm afraid you can't. Well, is it worth keeping it there, do you think?
Well, there's nowhere else to point it, is
No,
there?
I'm afraid not.
The space race was very good for you and the Sky at Night. As you say, it created great excitement in what was going on.
Well, the space age started. I mean, as recently as 1950, there were still people who said we'd never get to the moon, and certainly never get further. Well, that all vanished with the launch of Sputnik 1, and of course the flight of Yuri Gagarin quite soon after that. So men could go into space, and we were right in the space age. Of course, that boosted the program, obviously.
Do you regret, because I find that I have children who are scarcely even aware that man went to the moon because it all stopped. Do you regret that?
I'm not sure that I regret it. I mean, I think they ought to know. But after all, it all depends upon teaching, doesn't it? And that's not terribly good these days.
The space race, though, it seems to have slowed down, to have effectively stopped.
There's no longer a space race. There certainly was, but not for a long time now. The space program seems to have slowed down, but only in one sense. Manned space research hasn't progressed as quickly as people expected, for a number of reasons. So the Americans put all their cosmic eggs into one basket, the space shuttle, that took longer to develop than they thought, and cost more, and a couple of very nasty accidents. And the Russians went out of money. So the manned space research has slowed down, although we now have the International Space Station. But unmanned space research, that's a very different story. Probes now to all the planets, space observatories, 10 times more than we did. Huge space telescopes, everything there. So the unmanned has not. So the slowing down is only apparent. And if we do get, we'll go back to the moon, and then I think we'll have a lunar base, and that'll start up again.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
Roughly the middle of the Apollo program, Apollo 8 to Apollo 11, that, as a reporter and being involved in it, that must have been one of the great spells of your life.
I was wearing two hats, because I was on the NASA committee, therefore I was involved in that side, and of course I was doing the BBC reporting from here, so I was dodging to and fro between here and the United States. And it was a fascinating period. And of course Apollo 11 was the climax, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped out onto the Sea of Tranquility. And as we heard them going down, I was frankly nervous. Remember, it hadn't been done before. Had they made a faulty landing, in any way, they couldn't have got back. And that would have been too ghastly for worse. So when I heard Neil's voice coming through, I felt a great sense of relief.
Houston, the Eagle has landed. I'm going to step off the limb now. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And again, when they blasted back into orbit from the moon, they had one ascent engine that had to work properly first time, and mercifully it did. Then of course Apollo 13, that was a near disaster, but it was luck, skill, bravery, got away with it. But I think the Apollo program was finally called off, and enthusiastic though I am, I'm sure it's rightly so, because Apollo had done what it could, landed men on the moon, researched there, and left instruments, but doing it in other parts of the moon would have added quite a bit, but nothing fundamental. And sooner or later, something would have gone wrong. And I don't believe now there will be any more flights to the moon until there is rescue provision. That should come before too many years.
I was interested in that because reading accounts of those Apollo, the first moon landings, there was, which perhaps people don't realise now, there was genuine fear. It was not at all clear that they could get the astronauts back.
The main one was Apollo 11. Just as Yuri Gagarin's first orbit of space, that was the vital one. No one knew how the human frame would react.
We have rich people at the moment buying tickets to go into space. Do you regret that that is not something you will ever experience?
I'd love to go, but need a very massive rocket to launch me.
Would you, though, like to have done it?
Of course I would, but I never had a chance. I was the wrong age, wrong nationality, and no qualifications at all. I never had a chance, but I'm moderately proud of the fact that I did have a very small input in my moon mapping.
Apollo 8, there was a broadcasting problem, which is that, as the BBC have done in other things on other occasions, they cut away at the wrong moment.
I was down at Wood Green, and on the air live, and Apollo 8 had gone round the moon, and I said something to this effect. The men of Apollo 8 are now on the far side of the moon. They're coming round, and in less than a minute, they'll come round the edge, and we'll be able to hear them. We hope they come round on time, because after all, they've carried out a very risky manoeuvre. So I'll say no more now. In a few seconds, we hear the voices of the first men round the moon. And this is one of the great moments in human history. And the BBC changed over to Jackanory.
Reading the books of some of the astronauts, a lot of them seem to have been quite profoundly affected by the experience of going into space.
I remember Gene Cernan telling me that when he was on the moon, the thing that affected him most was looking up and seeing his home 250,000 miles away. Bound to affect you, obviously. I think, I wonder now if the first man on Mars has been born. It's possible, you know.
That would be, I mean, even more difficult to mount a mission than the Apollo one.
Oh, far more.
Is it plausible, do you think?
I think there are two reasons that may hold things up. The first is radiation. Once you're beyond the atmospheric screen, you're exposed to all kinds of unpleasant radiations. Well, on the moon you get away with it for a brief period. On Mars, weeks to get there and you're exposed to the whole thing. On Mars itself, incomplete protection and the journey home. So radiation is a problem, and no one quite knows yet how bad it is or how to counteract it. That's one problem. The second, of course, is do we want to? Because after all, one more war, a major war, and we're back in the Stone Age, and that could happen, I'm afraid.
A very long career with the Sky at Night. We've had various presenters. We've had Nick Ross of Crime Watch recently leaving the programme after 23 years, apparently told that they had to think about the age profile of the programme. Have you ever suffered from that at the BBC?
Not a bit. After all, I've been there for a long time. Everyone knows that I'm now 84. If they want to replace me, I wouldn't grumble. I've been there for a long time. And of course, we do have now Chris Lintott. So, I remember my first meeting with Chris. I give a lecture at the Torquay Boys' School, and an 11-year-old boy came and started talking to me. And I thought, this is rather an unusual 11-year-old. I think he'd better be cultivated. That was Chris. Well, I invited him on the programme. He's now co-presenter, and he has all the advantages that I haven't. First of all, he's got a first-class mathematical brain. He's got all his degrees now, and he's a good presenter too. And he enjoys doing it, so he will certainly be a better presenter than I am.
Would you want the programme to continue after you?
Oh, yes, most certainly. The reason being, no thanks to me, but I believe the programme has done good. It's brought people into astronomy, and certainly has encouraged those to take it up. So, yes, I will want it to continue, and I'm quite sure they will.
And you would want Chris to take over from you?
He'd be eminently suitable.
Apart from your Sky at Night career, there has been another side to your television life, which has been comedy, light entertainment, sending yourself up, in effect.
I don't mind laughing at myself. Why should I? No, it's great fun. There'll be all kinds of people.
What are you studying at the moment? What do your particular investigations lead you to study now?
You talking to me?
Yes.
Northern Stars.
Ah, Northern Stars.
Northern.
Which one in particular?
Proxima Centauri.
Proxima Centauri. Now, that is a fascinating star.
Yes,
Isn't it amazing to reflect that when you look at Proxima, you're seeing it was 4 years ago. The light from Proxima takes over 4 years to reach us.
Yes.
What
What is he talking about? What is he talking about? Throw him off. Get him off. He's quiet. He's a fool. But it takes the light of Proxima Centauri 4 years to reach the Earth. Rubbish! It's not rubbish.
It's certainly not rubbish.
No.
Far from it. And it may interest you to know this, Mr. Morecambe.
Yes.
The star Altair, the light from that takes 16 years to reach us.
Get off.
From Vega, 27 years.
Shut up.
From Rigel, 800 years.
Yeah, smash your face in.
And from Deneb, or Alpha Cygni, if you prefer.
I prefer.
From Alpha Cygni.
Yes.
1,500 years.
Get off. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's making it all up as it goes along.
Did you ever worry that it would detract from the seriousness?
No, not a bit. The reason being, when I do that kind of thing, I'm having fun. When I'm an astronomer, I'm a serious astronomer, and I don't mix the two. Everyone knows I don't mix the two, therefore there's no danger there.
And being impersonated, some people get sensitive about this, but you've rather enjoyed being impersonated by people.
I complained bitterly once that Mike Elwood, I've got a scar over my eye there. And I said to him, you got my scar wrong.
Now, a lot of people have been writing into the Sky Night asking various questions about astronomy. Well, of course, it is a fascinating subject. And a lot of people want to know, why don't we put the Sky at Night on earlier in the summertime so the children could watch? Well, of course, we would put it on earlier. But we have to wait till it goes damn well dark before we do the damn thing at all.
This was a scar I got during the war, American operation, over the Skagerrak, caught in a sheer flak, we in the jaws of death. Actually, I came off my motorbike in 1952. My wheel caught in a rut.
So as well as not, apart from not talking about your war record, you make up versions of it?
On that occasion,
You mentioned having written the book because of some of the people you'd met. Yes. I mean, some of those are very striking. Einstein, for example.
I met him once when I was a boy, in my flying training, a little conference I was invited to, and Einstein was there, and I was able to talk to him. He was, as you know, an expert violinist, and he happened to have his violin. He'd been playing somewhere, and somebody said, well, you demonstrate your violin. He said, oh, I play a swan, there's no accompanist. There was a piano there. Sanson Swan, I knew the accompaniment. So I've accompanied Einstein. Oh, for a tape. Well, there weren't any tapes then. I also met the first airman, Orville Wright. That was interesting.
Tell me about that.
I met at the same conference. He didn't die until 1948. He did very little flying after 1920. He was so sad that his aeroplane had been used in warfare, and he really rather faded into the background. But he was a very pleasant, unassuming kind of man.
What about Einstein? Was there any sense of the charisma?
He was exactly what you'd expect. Charming, courteous, out of this world, exactly as you'd imagine Einstein to be.
You were a very young man you were known as the Kid in your RAF years. Were you in awe of these people?
I don't think I was. I can't really say that I was. I was fascinated and honoured to meet them.
Arthur C. Clarke, who was a friend for a long time...
Still is,
but he is someone that you knew from early on.
We were both pre-war members of the British Interplanetary Society, and that's where Arthur and I originally met, and we've been close friends ever since. He lives, of course, now in Sri Lanka. We talk on the phone, and in aid of the Sri Lankan Disaster Fund, we put together a little book about asteroids, and we raised £13,000 or £14,000 for the fund.
You are listed in some places as music consultant on 2001: A Space Odyssey. Is that true?
I think it is. Only one bit. I'm having dinner with Arthur, and they wonder what music to use for the space sequence, and I said, use the Blue Danube. And they did. Now, whether that really came from me, I don't know. That was my only connection there. But certainly I did say, use the Blue Danube, and they did.
It would have been a big coincidence if it isn't from you saying
You're probably right.
Yeah. There's something to be proud of, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. It's an amazing film.
Another connection you have with Arthur C. Clarke, you've done less of it than him, but science fiction is an area you have written in.
I've written a whole series of boys' books, boys' novels on science fiction, and they're just going to be republished again because people have been trying to get them and can't, and been decided to republish them, put them on the web and see if people are interested, which I think they are.
Your mother wrote a book towards the end of her life, didn't she?
She wrote Mrs. Moran's Place with her lovely cartoons. I mean, her drawings are marvellous. And we put those together and with the text around it, and she had Mrs. Moran's Place with her one and only book. She was then 88. I may say she was a marvellous artist. If I had one spark of artistic ability, I'd try and develop it. But I am so hopeless that there's no point.
Music consultant, as we say, to 2001, we think, but you also have been a composer yourself.
I've written quite a lot of music, yes. The last thing I wrote, I think, was the band of the Royal Paratroop Brigade wanted a new march, so I wrote the march Out of the Sky for them. But the last thing I wrote before this hit me. And I've written three operas, Theseus, Perseus, and the last one, Galileo. So Galileo put on at Cambridge for a fortnight, and then another fortnight, and then I did a third performance, and then a week in Chichester, and then one down here. The story of Galileo, not quite according to the history books, I'm afraid.
As you told me, your mother was a singer, so she had musical interest, but she encouraged you to play instruments.
Yes, I can't remember the time I wasn't trying to play the piano, and I did for heaven's a very small boy. And I remember also, when I was 8, sitting at that piano and thinking, now this is silly. I can't read and write music, so I went and bought a book and taught myself. I was never a good sight reader.
And again, this comes out, virtually everything you've done, you have taught yourself.
In that particular respect, yes. But I know nothing about the theory of music at all. I've written waltzes, marches, and they've been played around quite a lot. I have got one thing that's no credit to me at all. Don't get me wrong, it's no credit to me, right? I've got perfect pitch and perfect time. And that, of course, does help.
Do you ever wish that the writing, the novels, for example, the music, that had been a bigger part of your life?
I wouldn't have altered the astronomy at all. I wish I'd had more time for music and writing, but you can't fit everything in. I used to wake up and then thinking, now, what have I got time to do today?
Although Moore's TV appearances have generated great affection, some of his personal opinions have led people to wonder what planet he's on. He supports the United Kingdom Independence Party, which campaigns against ties with Europe and in favour of tighter immigration controls. Moore's autobiography contained provocative complaints about gender and racial equality, and there was further controversy over comments in a recent interview about the BBC being taken over by women. Television has changed a great deal in those 50 years. You find television a less happy place now than at the beginning, don't you?
Not very less happy for me, because after all, I've never been involved. I'm not a BBC employee. I'm not involved in that kind of thing at all. I mean, I'm sure there are politics there, in which I don't get involved, so it doesn't affect me a bit. The programmes obviously have changed, but they go on.
And you said recently that it's because of women. There are too many women in TV.
What I said was this. Originally, the BBC was entirely male-dominated. Then the pendulum swung. What I actually said was, it swung a bit too far. But that's all I said, because it was the press took on it, of course. They expect that kind of thing.
But if it swung too far, then there are too many women in television, you think?
There were too many men originally.
When there were too many men, was that a problem?
I said there were too many men. I think probably I said we want a happy meal, and we'll get that most certainly. Now, after all, television does have an extremely important role to play now, far more so than I think anyone expected. After all, at the end of the war, television was it was just coming on, and no one really expected to take over, which it has. So it's more important than anyone could have dreamed, and therefore you've got to have a happy meal. I remember Paul Johnson telling me he produced a programme in 1938, I think, a political discussion between three politicians. It overran by 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Which you wouldn't be allowed to now.
No. I hope it was enjoyed by both the people who tuned in.
Your views, your political views, it's complicated because you are against fox hunting,
very much
notably.
So.
But in general, people have classed you as a man of the right. Some have even said the far right.
They can say what they like. I think I stand for sensible politics. I must admit, I do belong to a party. I belong to UKIP, United Kingdom Independence Party, but I'm far too old to do anything. So far as fox hunting is concerned, people enjoy that. Must come from another planet, as far as I'm concerned. But there we are. You see, we all got our own particular views, and I keep out of that kind of thing these days. The time I've got left, I've got so much I want to do. My main thing, I've just revised my big Atlas of the Universe, and I've got to revise my big data book now. And because I did a book with Brian May and Chris Lintott called Bang, and we're now producing the sequel Bang Up to Date. It's all great fun.
You say in your memoirs, very provocatively to a lot of people, you say that the worst acts of parliamentary legislation in history were the Sexual Discrimination Act and the Race Relations Act.
Well, what do you think? I don't like acts if the acts only apply in one direction. So, but as I say, I'm not in that field now. I'm too busy with my astronomical work. And also, music, I'd like to do a bit more of that if I can. I never was a good player. I was a composer. I did play the xylophone in the Royal Command performance once, and I enjoyed that. But I wasn't a good player. But I could write for other people, at least I hope I could.
But the reason, just going back to that...
I'm not going back to it, sorry.
You're not? Oh. You won't talk about your politics at all?
Of no interest to anybody else.
Well, you put them in your memoirs.
I know, dear. Very briefly.
Very briefly, and
we referred to it very briefly.
And I had one question arising from that page in your memoirs, which is that you say you don't like legislation going in one direction. The reason some people would say that was introduced was to redress a balance, that there had not been equality for non-white people, there had not been equality for women, and it needed to be addressed.
Colour doesn't matter, black, white or khaki, or vermilion or gamboge if you like. You haven't got their own ideas here.
The opposition to fox hunting, though, which confuses some people who wish to position you on the right, what makes you so opposed to fox hunting? I
don't like needless cruelty, and no one can deny that fox hunting is needlessly cruel. After all, can you enjoy chasing an animal that's dropping and then seeing it torn to bits by dogs? If anyone enjoys that, must come from another planet, and it's not me.
Some people, which is why they use the phrase, that colloquial phrase, the heavens, looking at the sky makes them think about God and eternity and all the rest of it. Has it ever had that effect on you?
The sky is a wondrous place. We wonder, how far does it go and what's up there? And I'm sure there are many races up there far more intelligent than we are. It will be very difficult. So whether they'll contact us, I don't know. But the one thing I do say, there are some people who say we shouldn't try to contact other races, but they might come and want to conquer us. I don't think that's valid. The reason being, quite simply, is for other races, more intelligent than we are, they'll have put war behind them. Otherwise they wouldn't survive. So if they do contact us, they'll be wiser than we are, and we needn't fear them.
what Stephen Hawking called the G word. He wrote the word God at the end of his book, A Brief History of the Universe. Have you ever been moved to thoughts of God?
I had one quarrel with a local vicar down here, a very serious quarrel. He dropped 2 caches off me in the slips in the same over. One off my fast one. Absolute sitter. He dropped it. I must say, in all, he had a very good field, I must say. And in the following match, he made 30 or 40, I went in at number 11. I had to stay there while he got his 100. And I stayed. Not out at the end. I can't bet so my life.
That's what Freddie Truman is supposed to have said to the Reverend David Shepherd, isn't he? Pretend it's Sunday and keep your hands together when he dropped a catch. So
I never played serious cricket for 2 reasons. First of all, people were kind enough to say that my unusual spin bowling would carry very good class cricket. You can carry a number 11 bat. You can't carry a field as bad as I am. And I'm an appalling field. I can't catch, I can't stop, I can't throw, I must throw the house. In the field I'm a passenger. And had I ever wanted to play serious cricket, that was directly, but I didn't anyway, of course.
I'm going to have a third go at this. I may not get anywhere, but I'm interested that astronomy has driven some people to quite deep thoughts of God, other people to very strong atheism. I just wondered where on that scale
you have to take a balance. I say there's so much up there we don't know about. And our knowledge is fragmentary. We know more, you can't form a judgment, frankly.
Do you think about death?
It'll happen to me one day.
Do you fear it?
No.
You mentioned this in the autobiography and at the beginning of this interview, the infirmities of old age have been an irritation to you.
It's a darn nuisance, I say. Well, only a few years ago I was playing tennis and cricket, and now I can't. Most annoying. There it is. I had a long run. You've got to accept these things. Nothing you can do about it.
Your mind, though, is clearly very strong and intact. Is that luck, or have you done anything?
Well, eyes, ears, and what passes for brain are not affected yet. It's my body that is. So I say I'll go on as long as I can.
But there are always, we open the newspapers, there are all these things about it's very important to do crosswords in order to keep your brain intact and so on.
Crosswords I never managed. The one clue I solved was a flightless bird with 3 letters, beginning with E and ending with U, and I solved that one.
But have you done anything to keep yourself mentally alert or active?
Yes, I'm studying all the time. You've got to keep abreast of everything, as I do. I thought I couldn't do this kind of night unless I kept abreast of astronomical stuff, and that does keep your what parts of your brain. It keeps you working very nicely.
The Sky at Night, as you've suggested, you will go on doing for as long as you possibly can.
As long as they want me to. If the BBC want me to go on, and people like to do what I do, I'll continue. If they don't, they think I'm too old, or I'm not doing it well, then I'll stand down. And I say, the first really bad programme I do is entirely my fault. That'll be my last.
And do you ever watch them and think, I have made a mistake, I have done something wrong?
I've many things I could do better. Most certainly so.
A large part of your life has been discovery, finding things out. What are the things you would still most like to know?
I'd like to know more about the origin of the universe. Above all, I'd like to know, is there intelligent life up there? I'm sure there is, but I can't prove it. And I think there'll be a pointer, even in my lifetime probably, because if we find any trace of life on Mars, that will show life will appear where it can. Some did say to me, if a flying saucer landed in my garden, a little green man came out, what would I say? I would say, good afternoon, tea or coffee. Please come with me to the nearest TV studio. It won't happen.
But even in the 50 years you've been broadcasting, most of what we have found out has argued against the existence of life, hasn't it?
No, I think quite the reverse. We know now there are many worlds like the Earth where life can appear. The only thing we don't know, will life appear where it can? I think Mars may give us the clue there. It won't be conclusive, but it will give us a good pointer.
Patrick Moore, thank you very much.
Nice to talk to you.